we're going to look at concretely the MAiD laws in Canada, which relate to assisted suicide and euthanasia in Canada. And of course, there are other countries as well that have pretty aggressive euthanasia laws in Europe, places like Netherlands and Belgium. And we wanted to get your take on the MAiD laws and what's going on there, and then also maybe look at them from the perspective of death and dying as seen from the pagan worldview, and not so much the Christian worldview, but the pagan worldview, and if there's any kind of intersection or interconnection between the kind of new spirituality that we're seeing and laws like the MAiD laws. So maybe you could give us just some initial insights into the MAiD laws for those who aren't familiar with them, how they've developed over the years, and what's going on with them right now.
Yeah, sure. I'll first of all premise this by saying I'm not an expert on some of the medical practices of my country, though I have to take note of what's taking place. And MAiD is something that is remarkable in its scope and in the potential for abuse and the very ethical nature, the very ethical problem of medical assistance in dying. And of course, that's what MAiD means, medical assistance in dying. And so we've had this on the books in Canada. It has been active in terms of its practitioner since 2016. And if you take a look at the numbers of how many people have been MAIDed in Canada, from 2016 up until 2022, the figure is just shy of 45,000 people who have died under the MAiD program. I believe it's 2022 when MAiD was the 6th largest contributor to death in Canada. And it was actually, you could really say it was the 5th, because the 5th and the 6th categories were like neck and neck. Only difference being, realistically a handful of people. But we've seen a lot of people who have chose to have medical assistance in dying, a form of euthanasia. And of course, being a Canadian, I know people who have chosen that route. If you have any Canadians listening to this, odds are really high that if they don't know somebody personally, they'll know somebody who knows somebody who has been MAIDed. I don't know what the numbers are for this year, for 2024. Of course, we're not done the year yet, but it's a significant issue in our country. The categories that enable MAiD to take place have become very broad. And that's one of the problems. I personally think there's a problem with the idea of MAiD to begin with. I think that there are some real ethical problems, some theological problems with medical assistance in dying. Nevertheless, if a nation is going to go down that route, you would think you would have very strict guidelines, very strict limitations. In Canada, we are broadening that, continually broadening it. If a doctor or a nurse practitioner engages in MAiD and kills somebody and doesn't follow certain procedural guidelines, they're subject to be placed under criminal law. It falls under a criminal act, and they could find themselves in front of the RCMP. They could be arrested. Interestingly, the Ontario Coroner Commission, the coroner's office for the province of Ontario, recently just came out with a report. It's probably, I think, the first one in Canada from a provincial point of view, recognizing that, there has been stepping over the line, a lot of stepping over the line, and nobody has been prosecuted. Nobody has been placed before the RCMP. Nobody has gone to a court. Yeah. So there seems to be, how do I say this, like a cultural slide or just an acceptance of the practice, and where there was maybe in the initial years a very clear, defined, we're doing this because oh, there's no remedy for your physical condition. Maybe you have a terminal disease. Well, you have to have a terminal disease. You did then. You had to have a terminal disease. Now it's far broader. It can include things like mental health issues. There's actually two tracks. There is considered to be the track of a non-reversible medical condition, something that would be considered to be terminal in any case. So we'll end the suffering, or we will end your life before the suffering even begins. And then there's track 2, which is a non-terminal condition. And that's where things can get really fuzzy really quickly, especially when you add mental health into the picture. And although 2027 is the year when mental health is supposed to become like the category that we can still all get mated under, it's already happening. Mental health is already a part of the process of being paneled, whether or not you should be mated or not.